Hello, everyone. So excited to be here today with our very special guest from very far away, California, Dr. Nicole LePera.
Thank
Uh,
you so much for having me, Renata.
Thank you and welcome. I'm gonna briefly introduce you. Dr. Nicole is a clinical psychologist who decided one day to join mental, physical, and spiritual health tools for people so they could start their own healing journey. She's also an author of the book, How to Do the Work and How to Meet Yourself workbook. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I know that every time we work from passion, our daily mission stems from what we are driven for. There's always a personal story involved. Could I ask you how you come to care for the themes that you work today with?
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's very much my personal journey embedded in my professional journey. As long as I can remember on the personal side of things, I struggled with anxiety. And I know for a lot of us, it's very common. And for a very long time, I was under the impression that I would always, be an anxious individual. I would always struggle to some degree and really driven to understand myself better, as I think is the case with many people that go into the field of psychology, and also to help others, gain that self-awareness so that they could make sense of their suffering, even come up with different tools to help them similarly manage whatever it was that they were struggling with. I was very motivated to become the clinical psychologist that I thought would allow me to create that practice and really create that personal and that professional impact. And several years into having a quickly successful practice where I was living at the time in Philadelphia here in the States, I started to feel not great about myself, not fulfilled that I had finally achieved this practice that I had been so desiring of creating, and the self-awareness that I was looking to gain within myself. I felt really disempowered because what I continued to see in my own life, in my own relationships, and in my clients was no amount of insight or awareness was really helping, if we really want to be simplified about it. And I kept hearing reports of being stuck. I'm still repeating the habits and patterns that don't serve me. I'm still, really suffering with depression, anxiety or whatever it might have been that brought these clients into my office. So for me, it began actually in a really low point where I got curious. How could I have gone to all of this school? How could I have been on both sides of the treatment,
Right.
in the treatment room myself, having been a client as well? And why is no one really getting very much better? And that is what led me to really uncovering so many aspects of our biology, which inspired me to incorporate the human body. For so long, I was working just from the shoulders up, if you will, with the mind, changing our thoughts, really relying on the power that lives there. But what I was really leaving out was the rest of our physical experience. So after a lot of learning of new tools, learning about the human body, I was able to transform myself and my own relationship with anxiety, so much so that I got really motivated to begin to share my journey in the Instagram account that began it all, which was the Holistic Psychologist at this point, 4 years ago now.
What do you mean when you say holistic psychologist? How is that different from, just psychologist?
Yes. So, and again, I'm really going to simplify this. I think traditionally here in the West, at least, traditional psychology is really about the mind, the gold standard, or the way most of us are trained. If you come through a clinical program here in the States, to provide that treatment is through something that's called cognitive behavioral therapy, with this idea that if we change the thoughts or cognitions in our mind, we change how we behave in the world, we relieve those suffering or whatever emotional experience that we're having. And so for me, that's part of the story. Holistic really, includes then the rest of the being, with an emphasis on the physical body.
It's so true what you are saying, because we have so many knowledge. I mean, we know so many things. I organize parenting summits, and I have a podcast and radio show for parents. So I go into those themes through parenting field, but I mean, parents are humans, right? So they struggle the most with what you just said, this, emotional well-being. I'm stuck. I don't know who I am anymore. Or, I don't know how to live my life. And also I want to be a model to my children, but I don't know what to project into this world because I don't even know who I am. So how I'm supposed to know who my children are and how I'm supposed to guide them. And we always try to address, as you said, our thoughts. So this, everything that lives in our head, and then our heart somehow it disappears, and our body, it's really like very recently that we started to talk that we also have this kind of temple, our body, and we live inside, and it's all interwoven, right? It's all connected.
Yeah, 100%. And to speak, specifically, to parents, when we, are in care of another human being, and, not being a parent myself, I can just speak from my own personal experience of, as I was entering into my 30s and I couldn't answer that question of who am I? I mean, I could barely at that point really decide how to navigate my time, where I wanted to spend my time, who I wanted to spend my time with. I always looked to other people for their advice, for their feedback, for what they think I should do. And for me, this all originated in my family. So I was really destabilized in my 30s when I really came to realize that I was being driven on all of these old habitual behaviors. And I wasn't connected with my heart, with who I was. None of the choices, or very few of the choices that I were making, were coming from that more authentic place. I couldn't answer that question. Who am I? So if we then, map that onto a parenting journey with the task of, shaping another child, creating the space for them to be curious about who they are, creating the safety for them to begin to explore their emotions. You said something, Renata, very profound when you acknowledge, as simple as it might sound, but that parents are humans, which means how they're showing up to care for their physical bodies is something they're modeling to their children. Even more so, how they're showing up within their emotional worlds. Emotions are what make us human. And all of that is what we're modeling and teaching, especially those of us that, have children around us. So if we're not able to define that safety, that space, answer who we are, be able to calmly and in a grounded way, more often than not, of course, because we're not perfect humans, navigate our difficult and upsetting emotions, what we're going to be modeling then for our children is going to be so much more powerful than even what the very well-intentioned statement or parenting book, right, told us the right things to say or do. What they're really going to be impacted by is what we're doing. So if we don't have safety in our body, if we're not able to regulate our nervous system, if we can't begin to answer that question, who am I, then chances are we're going to be passing on those habitual behaviors of adaptation to our children.
I love what you said about knowing from one side and being or even doing from other side. And those are very different things. And we tend to gather knowledge because we are all driven by, oh, I'm going to read another book, and then I'm going to, take another course. And now I get it. Now I know it. And then this is it. It stays there. I mean, we don't do anything with it. And just the knowledge doesn't change a thing in our lives because, it's still the same habits that I have. And this new knowledge just disappears into this routine and daily life. So how do you start to connect in with our body? I mean, with how we are on a daily basis, how we move from the life. Where do we start? Even if, especially if it's a new thing to us,
Yeah. And I want to just touch upon that, and then we'll get into the practical of where to start. Because when you're saying, again, it's a new thing, right? For so many of us, going back to this, maybe pattern that some of you might see in yourself of always reading a new book, always, on pulse or finding out the new information, and maybe even increasing self-awareness, always in therapy, always thinking about ourselves, right? Some of us might be endlessly stuck in that cycle of self-awareness, of thinking, of learning without doing, like you're saying. And there's a very real physiological reason why a lot of us find ourselves stuck in that, abyss, if you will. And the reason, again, lives in our body, which is wired to prefer that which is familiar. Or again, if we want to simplify that word a bit more, that which is predictable. the same thing that always happened in a very real way, our body gains a sense of safety in that. Because when I can't predict what happens next, when I don't know what comes after this new action, then I'm open up to the possibility that there could be something threatening. And in terms of our physiology and our evolution, we are wired to always prioritize our survival, which means the safer, right, the less threatening the environment, the experience, the more likely we're able to remain safe and able to remain in survival. So applying that now to these moments of learning new things, for some of us, even that action of learning keeps us disconnected from our physical body. I'm in my thinking mind. I'm paying attention to all of the words in all of these books that I'm reading. And we're going to talk a bit about attention in terms of shifting focus and reconnecting with our body in a second. But the first important assessment is, where is our attention most regularly, right? And when we're always lost in thought, when we're always reading a book, right? When we're always learning or in the next, seminar or workshop, our attention, right, is always somewhere else. And for some of us, there's safety in that. Because if I were to turn my attention to my body, I might then become aware of all of the uncomfortable constriction in my muscles. I might become aware of all of the emotions that have been accumulating over time that I might not have had the tools or resources to express, to allow out, to be connected to. And then to complicate things further, right, some of us are using learning as that protection. And if we come to that awareness, because you'll always hear me break changing, right? The decision I think that most of us are, coming to, and we listen to podcasts like this, I want to do something different. I will always break it down into 2 simplified steps. And the first step will always be become conscious of what your habits are now. What are you doing, thinking, what's creating the experiences that you're having around you? Once you become aware, then you could begin to make that new choices, right? So if you do become aware, so say you're listening to this podcast, you're like, oh gosh, I am someone who's always learning. I'm always in the next workshop. I always have the next book, or I'm always analyzing myself. That's an incredibly important piece of awareness, because now the awareness you're having is that your attention isn't on your physical body, isn't going to be able to tell you, right, how your nervous system is doing in terms of the moment, what emotions that you're feeling. Once you have that awareness, now you can make that new choice of refocusing your attention, of rebuilding that connection to your physical body. And as you do so, you're going to be met with the resistance, that natural pull that we will all feel back to those old habitual behaviors, because we'll be now embarking in newness. I'll be doing something new with my attention. I might be doing something intentionally different with the way I'm breathing, maybe shifting my energy from an elevated state back to a calmer state. Logically, this sounds beautiful, right? Because I'm becoming more peaceful. I'm becoming more calm. To my body that might be used to always being with that elevated energy, what it's going to register is unfamiliar territory, preferring or sending us into this loop where we will habitually prefer that which is predictable, even if it comes with a long line of consequences, right, to that resistance, that discomfort of being connected in a new way. So the real practical then tools are first setting those moments to check in, first tuning into, where is my attention? And if you notice, like the large majority of us that notice that my attention isn't in my physical vessel, isn't to how I'm actually experiencing this moment. It's lost in thought about an argument I had. It's worrying about something coming up tomorrow. It's just, my mind might even feel blank. It's somewhere else entirely. Once you have that important piece of information, now you could begin that reconnection process. You could begin to shift that focus to your physical body, feeling it as you're sitting, in the chair you're sitting in, laying on the bed you're laying in, feeling the point of contact of your physical body on the earth, feeling maybe the flow of breath through your lungs, feeling the heart rate, your heartbeat in your chest, whatever it is. The moment we make that choice to refocus our attention on our body, we're beginning that process of reconnection, even though for a large majority of us, it will feel uncomfortable. Because for me, I spent so much time disconnected to find safety in my thoughts, in endless actions, that refocusing that attention to my physical self, initially at least, felt very uncomfortable.
That resonates a lot with what you just said, because when we learn new things about how to do something else with our mind, like learn a new habit or a new thought pattern, it feels familiar because we kind of know how to do that. But when you talk about the body, just sit and feel how it feels and what do you feel under your, like legs. It seems and it sounds so silly. I would say that you're like, what? Like, you won't even try because it seems so ridiculous. Like, I'm gonna just sit and observe my body. I mean, what? How? So even if we are curious enough to try it, how much practice do we need to feel the difference? Because if I'm gonna do that one time, I'm just gonna sit, observe myself, feel my body. I'm gonna say, okay, this is it. Nothing changes my life. It's a mess downstairs. Kids are still, screaming, and there is still dinner to be prepared. So, nothing changed. I'll observe my body, nothing changed.
Yeah, I mean, you're Renata, you're bringing up a very, important and realistic point. And I think this applies even back in that old practice that I was sharing about a bit earlier, right? Where the clients that had the accessibility and the resources, knowing that a large majority just don't even have the possibility, right, of going into someone's supportive's office to talk about self-awareness, to be given these tools, even when you do have those resources available. That is 50 minutes is how long my old sessions used to be, block of time in a very large week, right? So what's going to happen then if you practice even self-awareness, a new way of relating, new way of thinking when you're in the supportive room? My question always followed, which was, well, what happens when you're outside of that room? And I would see the same around meditation often too, with this idea, right, that if we create a meditation practice, which I know for me historically was so uncomfortable, the idea of sitting, right, in stillness with my own thoughts was something that my endless doing and achieving through life kept me so safely distanced from, because sitting meant being attuned to all of the discomfort, all of the emotions that I had turned my focus away from for so long. And I would see, though, a very similar expectation, right, that we have this meditation pillow or practice, and it becomes something magical where now I'm different because I've done this thing for 1 or 2 or 5 minutes in my morning, yet when I go and I continue to live throughout the rest of my day, I'm still right back in those autopilot patterns. So just to apply this conversation in terms of reconnecting with our physical body, whether we're paying attention to it or not, the sensations that are within our physical body are being integrated into our perception and our experience of the world around us. So to really simplify what I'm meaning is, when we're having tension in our muscles, we're going to send then signals that our body is unsafe. It's being threatened. There's a stressor, or stressful experience in my environment, even if it's not. So even if I'm not paying attention to that tension in my body, my mind is. And what becomes more likely to happen next then is I start to think the worrisome thoughts, the stressful thoughts. I match the way my body is feeling, because my mind and my body, and this is something I was not taught in my clinical program, are in constant communication. Just as powerful as my mind is, that gold standard of CBT is built on, right? Change the way our mind is working, change the way our body feels. That works in the other direction as well. My body and all of the tension, all of the stress that so many of us are, housing in our physical vessels, some of us for a lifetime, based on things or that was created in environments that we're now long distance from, though that's the same signaling that my mind is going to receive. So it's going to color. This is where we get into those moments of, I can't wish away, positive think away, right? White knuckle away, a peace, the desire for peace, right? Because so many of us in our body, we're not wired for peace. We're wired and we're locked in a stress cycle. So when we talk about reconnecting with our body, you're absolutely right. It's not going to be in one moment. Some of us might not even be able to really connect with what's going on in our body in that one moment. We might hear a podcast like this and try to go sit in a room and really feel numb. And again, all of that might be because our system is so shut down. Our bodies has become numb out of a protection. We're not numb because of some intrinsic aspect of who we are, like we're a quote unquote cold person, so many of us have become numb out of protection. And that's just one example of why what is most important is the commitment to build a consistent connection with our body, which means for me, checking in with my body when I wake up, noticing areas of tension. For me, movement and stretching have been a very important part of my foundational journey, not only to reconnect with my body in those moments of moving and stretching it, but to begin to release all of that stress and tension that I've been mentioning that I've been carrying all along. My commitment to my body continues beyond those moments where I check in the morning. Every time throughout my day, I check in with my body. Am I hungry? Right? Am I full once I've eaten? Am I in need of rest at any moment? So this is the relationship that we do really want to cultivate. And because I imagine as you are listening, it feels very big, right? This feels like a very large task, especially if you come to realize how disconnected you are from your body. And now you're hearing someone tell you that you need to tune into your body to, identify when you're hungry, when you're full. And this might feel like it's so far distant from where you are now, though, again, bringing this full circle, it begins with that awareness first of how disconnected you are. And then with that small daily commitment, not to become attuned like I'm describing, I've learned to be now at all of these different moments, to build one moment where you do make that commitment to maybe starting with the top of your head, just noticing, right? Do you notice tension? Do you notice anything in that body? And your answer might be no for the first couple times that you practice that, though as you create familiarity in that refocusing of attention on my body and therefore safety, okay, what once felt completely overwhelming is beginning to feel a little bit safer, then you might start to get clarity on what's happening beneath in the body, in the vessel. Again, the reason why we want to do this, just to reiterate it, because it's so important, is because your mind is taking it into consideration, all of those sensations, all of those tensions, all of those stresses, even when you're not paying attention.
It's so mind-blowing what you just said. At the same time, I have this feeling that it just makes sense, because we are supposed to be, I guess, we are supposed to live in this synergy between our body and our mind. Why? Because we are biologically wired to survive, and then to become more and more of us, and to survive as a species. So if our mind goes against our body, then it would be like some kind of autoimmune disease, right? And we would kill ourselves from inside. So our mind has to work with our body, and our body has to take clues from our mind. But we so often separate those, like, here's my head, and then I have all those brilliant ideas, and then here's my body, and they kind of live separately in our mind, right? And then obviously they are connected. They have to be connected. So our body follows our mind, and our mind follows our body. That's brilliant, and that's mind-blowing.
Yeah,
Yes.
the reality, just really quickly, of it is we've known this for some time. I mean, ancient medicine, Eastern medicine often talks about this interconnected nature, and yet here, at least again in the West, I mean, to speak to your point, of separateness, it's contained within our systems. I mean, we have a medical system, right, where it's about the body. We have a mental health, or the system I came through, the psychology system, which is about the mind, and they might somewhat have a connection, or doctors of the mind, psychologists might every now and again talk to a psychiatrist, the person who's responsible for the medication, though outside of those moments there is no coordination. So again, we've gotten away, I think, from really ancient, accurate wisdom of understanding about the humans for many different reasons. And then it just becomes, the reason I'm bringing up the system, it becomes reinforced, right? We're given, like, I had never heard about the human body necessarily, the nervous system, and everything that I'm now so readily sharing at any part in my program, not because of any ill intent, I don't imagine, but because of, again, this very siloed way of science, if I just want to even throw something out really globally, is still really evolving. It's still very new in a lot of ways. Yes, we've made incredible advancements in understanding the human body, though there's still a lot that we don't yet know, that in some areas we're even having a hard time to measure and to conceptualize. Yet so many of us, we believe that science is in stone, and it's this like, knowledge that's just
Right.
how it is. And, I think more and more, even just the giggle we had about technology before we signed on to this, right? This interconnectedness, this sharing of information, of education, of ideas globally, which is now possible, I think is finally opening up people's minds that, some of these things that so many of us, me included, relied on without question, right? We can maybe begin to question a bit and gave ourselves the possibility to have now a much more inclusive or whole idea or awareness about our own reality.
So I have a question for you. So many people ask this question when we go into, like, let's say, we begin this journey towards our body and we really want to connect with it. We have those sensations and they are like, it doesn't feel right, or I don't feel like doing that, and the question is, how do I know if this I don't feel like, or it doesn't feel right, is my inner connected voice that is telling me, I'm like, Renata, there's something wrong, you shouldn't do that, like there's something like wrong with this practice? Or is it my mind telling me that, this is not familiar, as you said earlier, this is not predictable, we never have ever done that before, so don't go there and don't do that?
Yeah, really, really great question. I think by now a lot of listeners have probably heard of, right, that word intuition, or at least this idea or concept that there is a deeper place, of wisdom, of information, an inner roadmap, if you will. And I'm a wholehearted, not ironic that I said wholehearted, because in my opinion, at least, it does begin, or it's housed in the energetic space of our heart. Those moments where we're feeling, light and airy and excited by an idea or an experience are usually an indicator from our intuition or that deeper guidance, like a little nod. Like, yes, this is a good, an area, a path to continue, a journey to continue on. And of course, when we feel, a more opposite of constriction, tightness in our chest, that might be indicator, from our intuition, if it's coming from that deeper space, that this maybe is a path that we need to be a little more attentive to or avoid, or whatever it might be. Now, of course, some of us might, be receiving messages from our body that aren't necessarily coming from that balanced, intuitive place. And this actually was a large part of my own journey. For a very long time, given what I was modeled in my earliest relationships in my childhood environment, and because of the way the human body works, I developed a habit that I was finally able to witness. And I'm going to simplify it, which is really, I liked to avoid discomfort. I didn't like when things were painful in my body. I didn't like when I was stretching my muscles, for instance, and you would feel that tension in tight muscles. For as long as I can remember, have always had muscular tension. And of course, some of this now might not be coming as a surprise as we're, this far in the conversation. A stressed out body, right? All of these emotions contained in my body without the safety, without the parent to model how to navigate, be with those emotions, release those emotions so they could go somewhere, all were stuck in my system. And, because of the modeling in my home environment, what I had learned to do was, and I started to apply that exact kind of mentality or meaning, if you will, when I would go to stretch my muscles, say, because I was athletic. My whole life, I played sports. So stretching was very much a part of, and I'm just using this as one example, though. Stretching was very much a part of my, movement when I was in those organized practices, and I would avoid it. Anytime, I would feel a tinge, I would move away. I wouldn't push my body through discomfort at all. Similarly, I saw the same pattern in my emotional world. I had a habit by this point of avoiding, distracting my attention, just like we've been talking about, away from things that were emotionally uncomfortable. I was conflict avoidant. I didn't bring up or speak my mind when things were bothering me, usually for me, out of concern around upsetting and wanting to avoid upsetting someone else with what I thought, what I felt, what I wanted to do, or whatever it had been. So ultimately, what I was seeing in both of these areas was I had a habit of avoiding discomfort, whether it was in my physical body or in my emotional body. And for a very long time, I applied that exact language. Well, this is my intuition, right? Guiding me away from things that are hard. I associate it with things that are to be avoided until I was able to. So there is no simple answer to this question of, how do you know? There's not one particular sensation that I'm going to be able to share with all listeners that, oh, this is the sensation or the moment to know it's from your intuition versus, right, this is the moment to know it's driven by all of these habitual patterns and sensations and energies. It's the journey of being self-aware. And I'm going to simplify it, though, with what that looked like then for me is I became conscious of how unconscious I was. My attention was always elsewhere. And then in these moments throughout my day, I paid attention to how I was navigating my choices, always avoiding uncomfortable things. At this point, I came to understand that discomfort doesn't always mean to be avoided, right? To push our body through more and more discomfort, more and more stressful experiences actually helps us develop stress resilience, something that I had none of. I was totally unable. I was completely debilitated by stress and upsetting emotions, which is why I'm sure it's no surprise that I just got done saying I avoid emotions. Emotions make me uncomfortable. So as I watched myself, witnessed in that conscious state, all of these different patterns, understood my childhood environment the way I've come to understand it, now I'm able to differentiate, to say, I know the human body doesn't like change. I know the human body will naturally resist things that are uncomfortable and will register newness as discomfort. I know what my childhood looked like. I know how ill-equipped I am myself in dealing with my own emotions because I was never modeled how to. So now I was able to say for myself and to differentiate for myself in those moments, what I had long called intuition was not intuition at all. It was my very understandable habitual desire to avoid the discomfort that I wasn't equipped to deal with. Now my journey began with creating that ability to deal with discomfort in myself, teaching myself how to be tolerant of the stressful emotions in my body and the stressful emotions in my mind. So now being much more grounded, much more present, much more able with a wider window of tolerance is what we call it in the field, which is just simply the ability to deal with more and more stress without screaming, yelling, or becoming unhinged or shutting down completely. Now that my window is a bit wider, I'm able to stay in that calm, grounded state more, and I'm able to have more moments now of that intuitive guidance. So again, what I was calling intuition was avoidance of discomfort. That's my journey. Everyone listening won't look exactly the same, though we can begin to make those distinctions for ourselves as we get more connected, conscious of those habits, as we understand the impact of that conditioning, and as we increase our ability to be connected with ourselves, which actually does involve learning how to tolerate our emotions. Because when we're in those dysregulated emotional cycles, we're not actually grounded and connected to our intuition in those moments. We're having a nervous system behavioral reaction in those moments. So the intuition that we're really looking for, that inner guidance, is going to be in moments where we're calmly grounded in our body, where it feels peaceful, where we're able to maybe have that moment of silence that I avoided for so long because I avoided discomfort, so that I could tune into what my intuition feels like, sounds like. Is it a sensation? Is it an image? Is it an urging? Is it a visual that maybe pops into my mind seemingly out of nowhere? All of those are usually markers of intuition. It's not going to be the repetitive stories that are always going through my mind, the consistent feelings that are always stuck in my body. I'm always feeling this way about a certain thing, usually isn't indicative of intuition.
So I guess what you are saying is that more time I'm gonna spend with myself, better I would be able to distinguish between my resistance and my intuition. It's all about, time spent into introspection, and then it's like you are making a friend, you know him better and better. So I'm gonna know better and better if this is my intuition talking or my old resistance.
Yes. And again, just to apply this, because I know we're talking to a lot of parents, we're kind of around the parenting topic, right? And I think it's so easy, especially when we have a child in need of care, for us to step over the self, right? Like, just like you beautifully said, spending time with the self, even as a parent, is so critically important, because we're not going to be able to model. Our children are watching. If we don't create time and space for our own moments of reconnection, for our own moments of restabilization, if we are screaming and yelling, maybe making the choice to step out of the bedroom, our child's bedroom, for 2 seconds, to, ground our attention, maybe do some deep belly breathing to calm ourselves down just a bit, so that when we re-enter that bedroom, on the surface, we might think we're abandoning our child in that moment, though we might be re-entering that bedroom in a much more grounded place, and might then limit us saying or doing something much more hurtful. So again, I'm simplifying this to just one example of many, to really emphasize the importance of not forgetting that you still are a human being, and that the relationship with yourself that you are going to, for many of you, right after you listen to this, I hope, begin to reconnect with, begin to create space for, because it is a journey, isn't selfish. It's actually the greatest gift that you can model for your children, is the fact that they too have the responsibility and ability to have that separateness for their own self as well. So by you taking the space you need, the time you need, again, that will have that greater benefit, not only to limit those moments of explosive reactivity, which will inevitably continue to happen. Because if we're not caring for ourselves, we're not caring for our nervous system, we're not making sure that it has the nutrients that it needs, that it's getting the movement, the rest, and everything else to make sure that we stay as grounded as possible. And when we're not doing that, we increase the likelihood of those moments of very hurtful reactivity. So the choices we might make in the immediate moment to take a bit of space, to ask supportive loved ones, maybe in our community, to come over and maybe babysit for an hour, so that we can maybe go lay down for an hour, go run an errand, go take care of ourselves in a way, isn't selfish. It's actually, again, the greatest gift, because you're caring for yourself, which will translate later to you being much more grounded, open, and connected, and also having then modeled caring for yourself to your children.
It's so counterintuitive what we're saying, because I remember I was on a plane, and the first time I saw this notice that you should first put your oxygen mask on yourself, I was like, oh, this must be a man who have written this thing. I mean, no woman, no mom could put it that way, just not even thinkable of doing so. And when it took me a lot of time to really get what was behind, as you said, like, if I don't take care of myself, there's no way I could take care of other human being, because, it takes, I have to be resourceful. If there is like this empty space inside me, I have nothing to give. How could I take care of another human being? And then all those emotions run wild. It just so difficult if I'm not grounded, if I'm not centered on myself. I'm just gonna join the chaos in which my children live, I guess. And there's no way I could bring the peace or calm to them. It's gonna be more of the same, more of the chaos. And could we talk a little bit about that too? Like, we mentioned emotion so many times. So what do we do when we get emotional? What's the practice here? What am I supposed to do? So I have all those emotions, anger or frustration or sadness. So do I show them, and how I do that?
Yeah, that's a really, really beautiful question. And it really kind of piggybacks, kind of throughout this whole conversation, I think, in terms of what we've been talking about. And two themes that I continue to come up with is that, we're a human being, we are emotional. We don't always necessarily express our emotions, in a way that the next person necessarily would. And all that's beautiful. It's beautiful to show our children that. And I share this coming from a family who had very limited ability to show emotion. We didn't really talk about emotion outside of complaining or discussing the latest thing that we were stressed about, because we shared stress states. So we talked about stressful things that were upsetting or worrying us, though I never heard about things that made my parents or my siblings sad, angry. Grief never came up, even though there were losses that my family, in general, had suffered over the decades. So saying that to say, as we show the messiness of being human, So many of us weren't modeled that from our own past generation. So we might not feel safe. We might have all of these beliefs about why we shouldn't express the natural humanity of us, meaning show our feelings around our children. We might go and hide in our room when we're upset to cry so that they don't have to see or have to worry. And I think that there's such a gift in showing our children the whole range of human emotion, because they're going to meet those emotions on their own journey themselves. And the more we lock ourselves away in a room, even if we're not directly saying anything, the indirect message of never seeing mom or dad or whomever it is show emotions is that those emotions ought not to be shown for some reason, right? That they're shameful, that they're to be avoided, right? And children are so attuned that they are picking up on the absence of emotion. So allowing them to be part of the journey is part of the modeling of how to deal with our emotions for our children. So that means not being shameful, beginning to give language to those moments where you're emotionally upset, as you begin to find the language, because this is another area where I think we have this expectation that we should just know what sensations in our body map onto what feelings and how to talk about our emotions. And again, I'll be the first person to share, coming from that childhood who had no talk of emotions, no emotional expression, so much so that I found my safety being so disconnected for so long. I'm still learning my emotional language. I'm still fumbling through describing how I'm feeling in words. And that's all okay. It's not, we can't expect that we come kind of pre-programmed to have this relationship with our emotions that we're going to now teach our children if we've never in action had a relationship with our emotions. So that's an important, I think, just acknowledgement to have, which is that emotions are important, and then embodiment, action to take, which is allowing them to be present in our relationships, to show our children, how it is those moments, to allow ourselves to be, having an emotion in their presence. And then we can begin, to show and to teach other ways to remain grounded and safe when we're having an emotion, because you said something really beautiful a bit earlier. Our children actually are they're looking for us to be human alongside of them. And when they are dysregulated, they are looking for us to be that grounded, safe presence, not to just dive into the chaos alongside of them. When we're wired, our nervous systems are open and receptive, and we need a safe nervous system for our own nervous system in childhood to actually find its own way back into balance or into co-regulation, as we call it. So our children are always in need of that safe, secure base. So as we, begin to express our emotions, and as we then allow ourselves to take those moments of time to self-care, to restabilize, to come from, that escalated point of screaming and yelling back into our bodies, into a much more grounded presence, that is going to be of so much more benefit than pushing ourselves through our limits to just go into the bedroom because they're crying in this immediate moment. So we need to be there, even if we're not in the state to be there, because we will be then joining them in their chaos in that moment. They'll be dysregulated. We'll be dysregulated because of their dysregulation, and there won't be any grounded safety in that relationship. So again, just another case for how important it is for that daily consistent self-care, or even the beginning of that journey, for those moments where we do check in with ourselves and ask ourselves, how available am I to this little being? Am I grounded? Or might it make sense for me to go just take an extra minute or two to find my way back to a grounded place, so that when I go in and engage or pick up my child from school, if you know that that's going to be a difficult, a lot of children have trouble with transitions to and from school. If you already know those moments are difficult, as a parent, setting yourself up to succeed, maybe waking up an extra half hour earlier if you can, so that you have those moments before your child even gets up, right? If they have difficulties in the mornings, maybe it's not drop off school, right? We can begin to find moments to set ourselves up so that we can remain that grounded presence, so that when they're dysregulated, we are that safety that they need. We're not just in the chaos alongside of them.
I remembered when you talk about knowing how to name the emotion and then how to relate into the sensation in our body. I remember on my husband. Every time he's excited, he says, I'm nervous. I was like,
Yeah.
why are you keep saying that about yourself? Because this is not nervousness. You are excited. You are positively excited. I mean, you are willing to do things. And when you have, this a little bit of fear, but still excitement. He was like, because that's how my parents called me. Every time I was excited, running,
Yes.
being loud and, screaming, but I was like, you are so nervous. And even now, and I mean, he's a grown up now, he still uses
Yes.
nervous to describe himself when he's excited.
Yes.
So those childhood patterns, the way people saw us and then named us and then talked to us, it's a really strong voice in our head, and that's how we see ourselves. And this is, the beginning of a question: who am I if I'm not all those voices into my head who tell me that, I'm shy, or I'm nervous, or I'm loud, or I am too much, whatever it is. How do we begin this journey towards who I really am? I mean, how do you even begin to, I guess, put all those voices down, volume down, and then how I'm supposed to hear myself? I mean, where do I start? Often we say, I don't even know what I like. I mean, I used to do that and that and that, and now I'm a mom or a dad. I don't even know what I like.
Yes. Yes. And similar to your husband, I'm shaking my head with a big smile because I very much relate. Every emotional language was worry, stress. And so that, very similar to your husband, was what I have come to notice not only comes out of my mouth. I mean, there was a period of decades where I would, from the moment my eyes open, that would be my mantra throughout the day. I'm stressed. I don't want to do what I have to do. I'm tired. I'm stressed. I don't want to do it. And that was how I kind of recite it to anyone around me who's willing to listen. Oh, my day to day, this endless litany. And if it wasn't coming out of my mouth, it was in my internal world. And I kept repeating how stressed I was, how tired I was. And as I got more and more connected, I had those moments too, where I noticed, wait, Nicole, this might not be stress or fear you're feeling in these moments. This might be excitement or actually just energy in your system, about something that you're interested in doing. So, and to answer your question, then the way we begin to rediscover who we are is through those same two steps. First, we become conscious of all of the stories that we're telling ourselves, of all of the interpretations, because again, so wise you shared, so many of us, we become, not only do we, kind of internalize the language that our parents used, some of us internalize that and make it our identity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, being a shy child for a very long time, I heard you are shy, right? And that was a label that I wore up until I began to show myself and experience myself outside of my relationship at home, where I was in action, very shy. I was scared when strangers knocked on my door. If I was walking on the street with my mom, I would hide behind her leg. I didn't want any interaction with anybody that wasn't my immediate family. And so for a while, I am shy. And, it took until I had those shifting moments where I was able to give my own self an experience of being something other than shy, which for me happened in like later high school, early college time. I probably would have continued my life identifying as being shy, right? And how much that could have possibly limited my choices and my actions. And that's what so many of us are living, which is why, bringing this beautifully full circle, it doesn't have to be shameful as you come to the awareness that you don't know who you are, that you don't know what you like, that you don't know you want to spend your time or what you want to do, or even answer those deeper questions, right? What lights you up? What's of interest to you? Chances are you don't know because you've been disconnected from that deeper self for so long. So the way we come, right, again, to find ourselves out, to figure out who we are amidst all of these stories, is first we start where we are. We notice what those inner dialogues are. We notice the language we use. We begin to witness. That's what it means when I talk about living in consciousness, seeing for ourselves those moments, those internal narratives, the way we're describing ourselves to ourselves, the way we're describing ourselves to other people, right? And some of us can make those connections to where they came from. It isn't necessarily, though, necessary to do that, because we can begin here now, right? What are these repetitive stories that I'm telling myself? How am I defining myself? And can I create a bit of separation and space, right? To maybe begin to connect with myself and see if my feelings match these behaviors that I've been repeating for so long. See if, as I continue, again, tying this all together, as I continue to connect with my body, as I continue to, feel the sensations that live in there, as I continue to make sense of my emotions and maybe give myself some more tools to build that window of tolerance so that I'm not always just dysregulated and reactive, I can find, right, that grounded space. And then I can begin to actually tune in and listen to that intuition. And I might discover that the stories I had been telling myself for so long are actually quite different than what my heart is saying, that what my actual desires are, or that what I want to do, or whatever it might be. So again, it's the peeling back of an onion. I love to go back to that analogy because I think that really describes it, of, kind of peeling away all that we aren't to make space for us to become more connected then to who we are. What are we really thinking? What do we really want to say? How do we really feel, right? What is really of interest to us in this moment? And if you can't answer those questions right now, again, it's not because you don't have those parts inside of you. It's probably because your attention is elsewhere, right? You're habitually dysregulated. You're not able to feel safe enough into your body in stillness to actually ask yourself and explore those deeper questions, or those answers, but you don't feel safe enough in your relationships to express those, to speak your mind, to share your needs, right? To actualize on your interest. There might be something externally then in terms of your relationship dynamic. Again, another big conversation we could dive down a rabbit hole about, right? That began in childhood where you've learned not to express those parts of yourself. So it's, as we become clear internally, then the next task, and a lot of us do struggle for different reasons, expressing that externally, again, might be another area where we weren't modeled that freedom, that safety to just be ourselves. So then again, once we become aware of that, we can make the changes that we need to feel safer and safer to express those aspects in our relationships.
So true. I have one more last question for you. I read a lot of Buddhism books, and the question I'm always asking myself is, in Buddhism, they say that we are not our thoughts, we are not our emotions. We have this life potential that essentially could be anyone or anything would like to be. Like there's not even self in itself, the self we are trying to describe, who I am. Maybe there's not even this self to be found. What are your thoughts on it?
I think I really align in a lot of ways, because I think when we talk about who we are outside of our thoughts, and this kind of connects with this like field of being, if you will, that's kind of the language that comes to my mind, is we're that awareness, right? We're even the nature of this entire conversation, right? We're able to sit here, you and I, and talk about these thought patterns, right? This separation. Why are we able to talk about that? Because I've had moments of awareness. I like to describe it like overhead lights on in a room, where my room is just illuminated, right? So I can see the thoughts in my mind. If I drop down my attention, I can notice the sensations in my body, right? I can extend my attention outward and notice the world around me. I am that illuminated room. So I very much resonate with kind of that concept of self, which exists, in my opinion, beyond definition, beyond even the human language, so much so that it is hard sometimes. And I find myself in these moments having a hard time coming up with the words, right, to describe this being, because it is in another dimension, if you will. It's in another realm. It doesn't necessarily always translate to the logical world of thoughts and language that we humans have learned, and of course benefited, living with language and communication as one of our greatest tools. So in terms of Buddhism, this kind of like field of being, I do believe that that's, the essence. We each have a different energetic signature. We feel different when we're in that state of beingness, though, again, to translate it, I think, into understandable terms, the self that I think we're going back to reconnecting with does exist outside of definition, as that awareness, as that illumination. And I do urge and suggest too, because this is, I think, one of those concepts that it is hard to define. It is hard to make sense of. I do, urge and suggest all listeners to, find the language or the way in terms of their own definition that, makes sense and aligns. So for me, I do resonate with this idea of this field of being, pure state of awareness. That again is our goal, that will be energetically a bit different for me and for you. And that's what makes us all a bit unique and a bit different, a different way of perceiving the world, of expressing that energy outward. Though I do think it exists as more of a being state, for lack of a better word.
Thank you. It has been fascinating talking with you. Thank you so much. And please tell us, where can people find more of you and of your work?
Of course. Thank you so much, Renata. This has been a great conversation. Of course, thank you all for listening. So at this point, I'm pretty much on all of the social media platforms. So however it is that any of you listeners like to consume your content, whether it's YouTube or TikTok or Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, you can give a search to the Holistic Psychologist, because the handle on across all of those social media channels is usually some version of that. Of course, I'm Dr. Nicole LePera. You can check and make sure that's my name after it. And I do urge you to do that. We put out different types of content, videos on TikTok. I have a podcast myself. It's called the Self Healer Soundboard, that has its own YouTube channel, has its own Instagram account. So whether you like to, pop podcast in your ears or go the visual route, you can take a look across the social media platform that you like most, and chances are I am there. I have a website as well, theholisticspsychologist.com and howtomeetyourself.com, which will have all of the information about the newest workbook, which simply is, it's at this point, I think, really available wherever major books are sold. So you could check out either of those websites for more general information on all things the work that we do, including the Self Healer Circle, which is our monthly membership. And again, as well as about the new workbook, howtomeetyourself.com.
Thank you, and have a beautiful day, because it's night here, but I know you have a beautiful day ahead of you. So enjoy your day. And thank you, thank you, thank you.
I appreciate it so much. Have a good night yourself.